February 14th, 1929. Chicago, Illinois. North Side. The morning air is cold, sharp, silent. Inside a brick garage at 2122 North Clark Street, 7 men stand facing a wall. No one is speaking. A black Cadillac pulls up outside. 2 men step out, dressed as police officers. They walk in calmly. No one runs. No one resists. Seconds later, gunfire explodes through the building. Thompson submachine guns, shotguns, echoing in tight concrete. It lasts less than a minute. When it's over, 7 men are lying dead, execution style. And for decades, the truth would stay buried. This was not just a murder. This was a message. And behind it stood one of the most powerful men in organized crime history, Al Capone. To understand what happened inside that garage, you have to understand Chicago in the 1920s. Prohibition had turned the city into a battlefield. Alcohol was illegal, but demand never stopped. Instead, it created an empire. Bootlegging, extortion, gambling, protection rackets. Entire neighborhoods were controlled by criminal syndicates. On the South Side, Capone ruled. The Chicago outfit was efficient, ruthless, organized. Capone wasn't just a gangster. He was a businessman. Politicians were paid. Police were compromised. Judges were influenced. And violence was just another tool. But on the North Side, there was a problem. A rival. George Bugs Moran. Moran controlled the North Side gang. He was unpredictable, aggressive, and unlike Capone, he refused to cooperate. Their feud wasn't new. It had already claimed lives. Drive-by shootings, ambushes, retaliations, each side trying to eliminate the other. But by 1929, Capone wanted it finished. For good. The North Side gang was still a threat. They hijacked Capone's alcohol shipments. They interfered with his operations. They embarrassed him. And in the Mafia world, that couldn't be tolerated. So the decision was made. Quietly, deliberately. There would be no more war. Only an ending. The man believed to have orchestrated the plan was one of Capone's most trusted enforcers, Jack McGurn. Cold, calculated. He didn't just kill, he planned. And this would be his most infamous design. The setup was simple, elegant, deadly. A shipment of stolen whiskey was arranged. High quality, cheap price, too good to ignore. The North Side gang was invited to a garage on Clark Street. A neutral location, safe, routine. Inside that garage on the morning of February 14th, 7 men gathered. Among them, Frank Gussenberg, Peter Gussenberg, Adam Heyer, Albert Weinshank, Reinhard Schwimmer, John May, and another associate. They weren't expecting trouble. Not like this. But one man was missing. The target. The reason behind it all. Bugs Moran. He was late, running behind schedule. And that saved his life. Outside the garage, the Cadillac stopped. Witnesses later said it looked official. Convincing. 2 men dressed as police officers stepped out. Behind them, 2 more men, all heavily armed. Inside, someone noticed. Police, a voice said. And in that moment, everything changed. But not in the way you'd expect. No one reached for a weapon. No one ran. Because this looked like a raid. Routine. It had happened before. The men were lined up against the wall. Hands raised. Facing forward. Compliant. Then the shooting began. 2 Thompson submachine guns opened fire, spraying bullets into their backs. Shotguns followed. Close range. Brutal. Efficient. 70 rounds. In seconds, bodies collapsed onto the concrete floor, blood pooling beneath them. The sound of gunfire fading into silence. When it was over, the killers didn't rush. They didn't panic. They walked out calmly, just like they walked in. Witnesses saw something strange. 2 police officers escorting 2 suspects out of the garage. Hands raised, as if making an arrest. It was part of the illusion. A perfect disguise. No suspicion. No chase. By the time real police arrived, it was already over. Inside the garage, the scene was horrifying. 7 men, dead or dying. One of them, Frank Gussenberg, was still alive. Barely. Shot multiple times. An officer leaned down. "Who shot you?" Gussenberg looked up, blood in his mouth, struggling to breathe. Then he said the words that would define the case. "No one shot me." He died hours later, taking the truth with him. Outside, news spread quickly. Chicago had seen violence before, but nothing like this. 7 men, executed in broad daylight. Newspapers exploded with headlines. The public was shocked, terrified, and for the first time, America started paying attention. Who could do something like this? Who had the power to stage a fake police raid and walk away without consequence? All eyes turned to one man, Al Capone. But there was a problem. Capone wasn't in Chicago, at least officially. At the time of the massacre, he was in Florida, relaxing, publicly visible, with witnesses, an alibi, clean, carefully timed. Law enforcement knew. They all knew. But knowing and proving were two very different things. The Chicago Police Department launched an investigation. So did federal agents. Questions were everywhere. Who were the shooters? How did they get police uniforms? Who arranged the meeting? And most importantly, who gave the order? But inside the world of organized crime, no one talks. Witnesses disappear. Evidence vanishes. Stories change. And fear keeps everyone silent. Behind closed doors, the message was clear. The North Side Gang had been crippled, their leadership destroyed, their power broken. And Capone had sent a signal to every rival in America. This is what happens when you stand in his way. But something else had happened that day. Something Capone didn't expect. The massacre didn't just eliminate enemies. It drew attention, national attention. Politicians demanded action. The federal government stepped in. For the first time, organized crime wasn't just a local problem. It became a national crisis. And slowly, quietly, the pressure began to build. Not just on the streets, but on Capone himself. Because even though no one could prove he ordered the killings, everyone knew. And in the world of crime, that kind of spotlight is dangerous. Very dangerous. The 7 bodies inside that garage were just the beginning. Because what followed would bring down one of the most powerful men in American history and expose a truth the Mafia tried to bury forever. February 1929. Chicago is on edge. The blood inside that garage hasn't even dried, and already the city is changing. Reporters crowd the streets. Cameras flash. Headlines scream. 7 men executed. No arrests. No witnesses willing to talk. Inside police headquarters, frustration builds. The Chicago Police Department has a crime scene. They have bodies. They have bullets. But they don't have a case. Ballistics experts begin their work. Shell casings are collected. Weapons are analyzed. 2 Thompson submachine guns. Distinctive. Recognizable. Used before in other crimes. Investigators connect the weapons to known associates of the Chicago outfit. Names begin to surface. Quietly. Carefully. One of them, Fred Burke, a violent enforcer. Unpredictable. Known for robberies and murder. Another name appears in whispers again and again. Jack McGurn. The same man Capone trusted with delicate problems. The same man who understood how to make violence disappear. But whispers are not evidence. And in Chicago, evidence has a way of vanishing. Witnesses are interviewed. Some claim they saw the police officers. Others describe the car. But details don't match. Stories change. People forget. Fear spreads faster than facts. Because everyone understands one thing. If you talk, you don't live long. Meanwhile, Al Capone watches from Florida. Palm trees. Sunlight. Luxury. Reporters try to confront him. Did you order the killings? Capone smiles. Calm. Unbothered. I don't even know what you're talking about, he says. It's a performance. Carefully controlled. But behind the scenes, the pressure is growing. Because this time, the violence crossed the line. The federal government begins to take interest. Not in whispers, not in rumors, but in results. The Bureau of Investigation, the early version of what would become the Federal Bureau of Investigation, starts building a broader case. They realize something important. They may never prove Capone ordered the massacre, but they don't have to. Capone's empire is massive. Bootlegging, illegal breweries, distribution networks across multiple states, millions of dollars, and none of it is taxed. So the strategy changes. If they can't get him for murder, they'll get him for something else. Something simpler, something undeniable, money. At the same time, inside Chicago, the power balance begins to shift. The North Side Gang is broken, leaderless, disorganized. George Bug Moran is still alive, but barely holding on. He knows what happened. He knows who did it, but he can't prove it. and he can't retaliate because now everyone is watching. The massacre didn't just weaken Moran, it exposed the entire system. Politicians who once ignored organized crime now face public outrage. How can this happen in broad daylight? Where were the police? Who is really in control of the city? The answers are uncomfortable. Because corruption runs deep, police officers paid off, officials compromised, information leaked. The line between law and crime is blurred, and Capone sits at the center of it all. But power comes with a cost. Inside his own organization, paranoia begins to grow. Too much attention, too much pressure, too many eyes. Associates begin to worry. Informants become a real threat. One wrong move, and everything collapses. At the same time, law enforcement gets smarter. Surveillance increases. Financial records are examined. Witnesses are protected, when possible. And slowly, a different kind of case is built. Not with bullets, not with bodies, but with paper, numbers, accounts. The man leading that effort is not a street cop. He's an accountant, Frank J. Wilson. Quiet, methodical, relentless. He doesn't chase killers. He follows money. And what he finds is exactly what they need. Capone is earning millions, but reporting almost nothing. No legitimate business, no official income. Yet he lives like a king. Luxury hotels, expensive suits, endless cash. It doesn't add up. And in the eyes of the law, that's enough. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, the St. Valentine's Day massacre remains unsolved. No one is charged. No one is convicted. The case grows cold, but it's never forgotten because it changed everything. It forced the government to adapt, to evolve, to understand that organized crime couldn't be fought like ordinary crime. It required patience, strategy, and a different kind of weapon, evidence that couldn't be silenced. And that's exactly what they were building. Back in Florida, Capone still believes he's untouchable. He survived gang wars, assassination attempts, police investigations. He controls the streets, or at least he thinks he does. But the streets are no longer the problem. The danger now is invisible. Paper trails, financial records, witness statements, things that don't disappear with intimidation, things that don't bleed. And slowly, quietly, the walls begin to close in. The massacre that was meant to end a war has started something far more dangerous. A federal pursuit, not of a crime scene, but of a man. Because while the 7 bodies inside that garage never spoke, their deaths changed the rules. And in doing so, they sealed Capone's fate. The truth may have stayed buried in that garage, but the consequences were just beginning to rise. And soon, the most powerful gangster in America would learn that even he couldn't outrun what was coming next. October 1931. Chicago is quieter now. Not safer, just quieter. The violence hasn't disappeared. It's adapted, hidden, controlled. But something else has changed. For the first time in years, Al Capone is no longer untouchable. The man who built an empire through fear is now standing in a courtroom. Not for murder, not for the 7 bodies in that garage, but for something far more ordinary. Tax evasion. It sounds almost insignificant compared to everything else. But this is the case that finally stuck. Behind the scenes, the work had taken years. Led by Frank J. Wilson, federal investigators had done what no one else could. They followed the money. Not rumors, not witnesses. Facts, numbers, records. They proved that Capone earned millions and reported almost nothing. The evidence was clean, undeniable. And this time, there were no bodies to silence. In court, Capone tried to negotiate a deal, a reduced sentence. But something had changed. Public pressure was too strong. The government needed a victory. The massacre of February 1929 still lingered in the background, unsolved, unpunished. And even though Capone was never charged for it, everyone knew. The courtroom was full. Reporters watched closely. The nation was listening. Capone sat quietly, dressed sharply, controlled. But the illusion was gone. No more power, no more protection. Just a man, facing the consequences. October 17th, 1931. The verdict is delivered. Guilty. Capone is sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. It's the longest sentence ever given for tax evasion at the time. A message. Clear. Final. the most powerful gangster in America, has fallen. He is first sent to Atlanta, then transferred to a place designed for men like him. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, an island, surrounded by cold water, impossible to escape. Inside Alcatraz, Capone is just another inmate. No influence, no control, no empire. The guards don't take bribes. The walls don't listen. For the first time in years, he is alone. And slowly, he begins to break. Years of untreated illness, mental decline, isolation. The man who once ruled Chicago fades. By the time he's released in 1939, he is no longer the same person. The power is gone, the fear is gone, and the legend is over. But the story of that garage never truly ends, because the St. Valentine's Day massacre remains officially unsolved. No one is ever convicted. No one confesses. The names of the shooters are still debated. Fred Burke is widely believed to have been one of them. Jack McGurn, the alleged architect, is never charged. In fact, he meets his own end just a few years later. February 1936, Chicago. He walks into a bowling alley, relaxed, unaware. Two men approach, guns drawn, shots fired. McGurn collapses, dead. Another killing, another message. No witnesses, no arrests. The cycle continues. As for George Bugs Moran, he never regains his power. The massacre destroyed his organization. He fades into obscurity, eventually arrested for unrelated crimes. The North Side Gang disappears, and the Chicago outfit adapts. Because while Capone falls, the system survives. New leaders rise, quieter, smarter, less visible. The violence becomes more controlled, more strategic. Lessons learned. Don't draw attention. Don't create headlines. Because attention is what brought Capone down. Not the murders, not the bloodshed, but the spotlight. And the 7 men inside that garage become something else. Not just victims, symbols of a turning point. Before that day, organized crime operated in the shadows. Ignored, tolerated. After that day, it became impossible to ignore. The massacre forced change. New laws, new strategies, a federal approach to organized crime, and a realization the Mafia could be powerful, but it wasn't invincible. Still, the truth of what happened inside that garage remains buried in silence. No official order, no signed document, no confession, just evidence. Circumstantial, incomplete, and yet clear enough. Because in that world, you don't need proof. You just need to understand the rules. Power is taken, loyalty is temporary, and betrayal is inevitable. The 7 men who stood against that wall never had a chance. They trusted the system. They believed the lie. And in doing so, they walked into their own execution. That's the reality of organized crime. There are no warnings, no second chances, only decisions and consequences. The St. Valentine's Day massacre was never solved, but it was never a mystery. It was a statement, a demonstration of power, and a reminder that in the world of the Mafia, the truth is often known, but rarely spoken. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't what people don't know. It's what everyone knows, but no one can prove.